He threw a can of Coke at a woman in the office, laughed in front of everyone, and thought he got away with it. What he didn't know, that woman was the CEO's wife. And in less than 24 hours, his entire career was gone. This story? It's one for the books. Welcome to BrainFuel, where real stories spark real perspective. From shocking office drama to powerful life lessons, we break down the moments that make you stop, think, and grow. If you're into stories that feed your mind and hit your heart, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. You ever witnessed something so ridiculous, so disrespectful, that it felt like a scene straight out of a movie? Well, this is one of those stories. It was a Tuesday morning, not just any Tuesday, but one of those mornings where the office is strangely quiet like the calm before a storm. People were nursing their coffees, answering emails, chatting softly in corners. The usual buzz of keyboards and footsteps echoed through the high-end corporate headquarters of a well-known marketing firm in downtown Atlanta. And then it happened. A Coca-Cola can flew across the office. Yes, an actual can of Coke. Not knocked off a desk. Not spilled by accident. It was thrown, on purpose, by a man named Brandon, a young, smug marketing executive who believed he ran the place. To be honest, many in the office thought the same. He was confident, charming to the bosses, and dressed like he was heading to a GQ photo shoot every day. But underneath all that polish, he was toxic. He loved mocking new hires, made borderline racist jokes when no one was recording, and had a serious problem with anyone who didn't look, talk, or act like him. People put up with him because he had connections, or so they thought. Anyway, back to the can. Brandon was standing in the break room, chatting loudly on his AirPods, waving his arms around like he was presenting to the president. He had just grabbed a cold Coke from the fridge and was mid-rant about how someone stole his spot in the parking garage. Just then, a woman walked past him. She was black, beautifully dressed, confident, calm. A quiet elegance surrounded her, the kind that makes you instinctively sit up straighter. She wore a cream-colored blouse, gold earrings, and designer heels. She looked like she didn't belong in any one department, like maybe she owned the whole building. But to Brandon, she was invisible. She accidentally brushed past him while passing the break room, gently bumping his arm as she moved toward the hallway. A tiny splash of Coke fizzed over the rim of his can and onto his sleeve. Now, to any reasonable person, this was nothing. But Brandon wasn't reasonable. He turned, scoffed loudly, and said with a snide voice, "Yo, watch where you're going." The woman paused and looked at him, not with fear, not with anger, just calm curiosity, like she was trying to figure out who exactly he thought he was talking to. Brandon, feeling bold and trying to impress his little audience nearby, rolled his eyes and tossed his still full Coke can in her direction. It didn't hit her, but it splashed all over her expensive outfit. Cold soda running down her blouse, staining her trousers. Sticky silence filled the office. Everyone stopped. Like everyone, conversations died mid-sentence. The clink of the can echoed across the open floor. A nearby intern's jaw literally dropped. Someone gasped. A guy dropped his coffee. But Brandon? He smirked. "Maybe stick to the mailroom next time," he muttered, not realizing his words had just dug him a 6-foot professional grave. The woman looked down slowly at her outfit, took a single deep breath, and then looked him straight in the eyes. There was no yelling, no dramatic speech, just a small, knowing smile. She reached in her purse and pulled out a silk handkerchief, not one of those cheap tissue thin ones. A real one, embroidered initials. Clean, classy. She calmly dabbed the Coke from her blouse. Then, without a word, she turned and walked across the office straight toward the CEO's private elevator, the one nobody uses unless you're top level or family. People watched, stunned. Brandon raised an eyebrow. "Wait, where's she going?" he mumbled. A few heads turned in confusion. Someone whispered, "Is she like an executive?" And then the office whisper started. "Who is she?" She walked right into Anthony Caldwell's elevator. "Did you see how calm she was? Dude, she's got to be somebody." Brandon stood frozen, the smirk slowly fading. Suddenly, the silence wasn't so comfortable anymore. People weren't laughing. They were watching. Very closely. Brandon tried to act cool, pretending like nothing had happened. But even he felt the shift in energy. He didn't know it yet, but his whole world was about to come crashing down. Because the woman he just humiliated, she wasn't an intern. She wasn't a temp. She wasn't a secretary or a guest from HR. She was Dr. Naomi Caldwell, a renowned business psychologist, Fortune 500 consultant, and the wife of the CEO. Brandon had no idea what he had just done. To him, it was nothing, just a little incident. A little joke, maybe. He didn't think twice about it. In fact, after throwing the Coke and making that snide comment, he actually smirked and strutted back to his desk like he just delivered a punchline at a comedy show. He sat down, sipped his coffee like nothing happened, and went back to pretending he was the most important person in the building. But all around him, the energy in the office had completely shifted. People weren't laughing. They weren't smiling. They were watching and whispering. Even those who usually laughed at his jokes or smiled to stay on his good side, looked uncomfortable. The woman, the one he threw Coke on, had walked directly into the private elevator, the one that only top executives used. And not just any elevator, but the one that went straight to the CEO's floor. No one ever used it unless they were invited. Suddenly, questions started flying through the office like wildfire. Wait, who was she? She just went to the CEO's suite? You saw that, right? Why didn't she say anything to Brandon? Yo, is she like someone important? The interns were texting under their desks. The mid-level managers were trading nervous glances. And Brandon? He was still clueless. He leaned back in his chair, looked around, and said loud enough for half the floor to hear, "People need to learn how to take a joke." But no one responded. Not even his usual yes men. That was the first time he started to feel it, that weird pressure in the room. That silence that wasn't quiet. The kind that meant something was about to happen. Still, Brandon brushed it off. She probably works in HR or something, he muttered. Can't take a joke, gets bumped, spills my Coke, and I'm a bad guy. To him, it was just another day of flexing his ego. But what Brandon didn't realize was that the woman he had just disrespected, the one he arrogantly told to stick to the mailroom, was Dr. Naomi Caldwell, a highly respected figure in the business world. She had advised global companies, spoken at leadership summits, and authored best-selling books on corporate behavior and diversity in the workplace. She wasn't just a guest in the building. She was the guest, brought in specifically to help the company address issues of leadership, respect, and inclusion. Oh, and one more small detail. She was the CEO's wife. Not that it should matter who she was. No one deserves to be disrespected like that, regardless of title, position, or last name. But for Brandon, this was about to become the harshest, most humiliating lesson of his life. Back in the CEO's suite, Dr. Caldwell was calmly relaying what had just happened to her husband, Anthony Caldwell, founder and CEO of the company. She didn't exaggerate. She didn't dramatize. She told him exactly what happened, with precision, professionalism, and poise. Do you have video? Anthony asked. She nodded. I recorded the entire encounter on my phone, just in case. And she had. Without Brandon realizing it, she had tapped her phone the moment he raised his voice. Every word, every snide comment, every ounce of disrespect captured. Anthony Caldwell listened, his jaw clenched tight. He was a respected businessman, known for being calm, strategic, and composed. But when he saw that Coke fly and heard Brandon's smug mailroom remark on the video, his entire demeanor changed. That man works here? He asked, almost in disbelief. Naomi nodded. He treated me like trash in front of your entire staff, she said, not knowing who I was, not caring who I was. And even if I were a stranger, is that how your team treats people? The question hit hard. Anthony Caldwell wasn't just a CEO. He built his company from the ground up. He believed in values, respect, character. It was personal. And now, one of his employees had publicly embarrassed his wife, and by extension, the company. Back on the main floor, Brandon finally received an email alert on his laptop. Subject: urgent. HR meeting today at 2 p.m. from executive office. He chuckled to himself. Must be about the Q3 presentation. He had no idea. Around 1:55 p.m., Brandon walked into the HR meeting room with his usual swagger. still dressed to impress, still clueless. But when he opened the door, his smirk faded. Inside the room sat three people: the head of HR, the chief operating officer, and the CEO himself, Mr. Anthony Caldwell. Brandon's stomach dropped. He straightened his posture, trying to maintain composure. Hey, gentlemen, he said. What's this about? Mr. Caldwell looked up, calm but firm. Brandon, do you know who you disrespected this morning? Brandon blinked. What? You mean that? Lady from earlier? She bumped into me. I didn't mean anything by it. Just a little joke. Mr. Caldwell didn't blink. That lady is my wife. The silence in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Brandon stood frozen, halfway into the chair across from the CEO, his arrogant swagger nowhere in sight. For the first time since he joined the company, he wasn't the loudest person in the room. He wasn't even talking. His eyes darted between Mr. Caldwell, the COO, and the head of HR, trying to read their expressions like a poker player with a terrible hand. He had just heard the sentence that cracked his confidence like glass under pressure. That lady is my wife. At first, he thought he misheard. Maybe he said advisor or consultant or partner. But no, the words were clear. Anthony Caldwell, the man who ran the company, the very person Brandon always tried to impress with half-baked ideas and flashy sales talk, had just told him that the woman he had drenched with soda and disrespected in front of the entire floor was his wife, Dr. Naomi Caldwell. And now, Brandon's face had gone pale. He stumbled for words. "Yes, sir. I didn't know. She didn't say anything. I thought she was just..." "Just what?" Mr. Caldwell cut in. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. There was steel in his tone. "Just a guest? Just a temp? Just someone you assumed was beneath you?" Brandon shifted in his chair. His expensive watch suddenly felt too tight on his wrist. "Look, it was a misunderstanding. I didn't mean for the Coke to hit her. I was joking. It was just office humor." The HR manager raised an eyebrow. "That wasn't a joke, Brandon. That was workplace aggression. And humiliation," the COO added. "In front of witnesses." Mr. Caldwell reached into a folder and pulled out a printout, a still image from a phone recording. It showed Brandon mid-throw, arm raised, mouth twisted in a smug grin, and the Coke in midair, just before it splashed across Naomi's outfit. Then he played the video. The sound filled the room. Brandon's voice was unmistakable. "Watch where you're going. Maybe stick to the mailroom next time." Brandon flinched. "I didn't know she was your wife," he blurted, desperate now. "If I had known..." "And that's the problem," Mr. Caldwell said sharply, his calm cracking ever so slightly. "You shouldn't have to know someone's title or last name to treat them with basic human decency." The words hung in the air like thunder. "You looked at a black woman in a nice outfit and decided she was below you. You mocked her. You disrespected her. And you thought you'd get away with it because that's what you've always done." Brandon opened his mouth, but Mr. Caldwell raised a hand. "Let me make something very clear, Brandon. This isn't just about my wife. This is about a pattern." He turned toward the HR director. She nodded and pulled out a second folder, this one thicker. "We've had multiple complaints about your behavior over the last year," she said. "Disrespecting interns, belittling junior staff, making racially insensitive remarks that walk the line but always seem to skate by. We let a lot slide," the COO added not proudly. "But no more." Brandon looked around, sweating now. "Look, I've brought in a lot of clients. I hit my sales targets. I've always delivered. And you think that excuses your character?" Mr. Caldwell asked. "Your behavior has made this company weaker, not stronger. You've poisoned the culture. And today, you made it personal." There it was, the final nail in the coffin. Brandon's charm had finally run out. His numbers, his performance, his smooth talk. None of it could save him now. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I'll apologize to her. Please. I didn't know." "You had your chance," Mr. Caldwell replied. "You had plenty of chances." And just like that, the decision was made. Effective immediately, Brandon was suspended without pay pending further disciplinary review. But everyone in that room knew what that meant. It was just a formality before termination. As Brandon left the conference room, he avoided eye contact with the staff in the hallway. The same people he used to laugh around, bark orders at, or ignore completely now watched him walk the walk of shame. For the first time, the office superstar looked small. Back upstairs, Dr. Naomi Caldwell stood by the CEO's window, looking out at the city skyline. She turned as her husband entered the room. "It's done," he said softly. She nodded. It wasn't about revenge. It was about change. He smiled. "That's why I married you." What Brandon didn't understand, and what many people still fail to see, is that true power doesn't shout. It doesn't throw drinks or demand attention. It doesn't mock others to feel bigger. Real power walks quietly, with dignity and purpose. And on that day in that office, it wasn't the Coke that caused the biggest splash. It was the calm, collected woman who refused to stoop to ignorance. The woman who taught everyone that day a lesson they would never forget. Respect is not earned by status. It's required by humanity. Brandon's fall from grace wasn't just swift, it was spectacular. Less than 24 hours after the cocaine incident, his office access card stopped working. He stood in front of the glass doors the next morning, badge in hand, swiping again and again. Nothing. A security guard walked over, someone Brandon never acknowledged before. "Sir, I'm going to need you to come with me," the guard said politely. Brandon frowned. "I work here." The guard didn't blink. "You'll need to speak with HR first." And just like that, the man who once barked orders at receptionists and rolled his eyes at support staff was being escorted like a guest, not a star employee. People passing by watched through the glass with subtle, knowing glances. Some whispered. A few smirked. By 10 a.m., Brandon was in the same HR office as the day before. Only this time, he wasn't sitting across from leadership. This time, it was formal. Documents were waiting. A termination letter. Severance details. Exit paperwork. He tried to argue. "This is ridiculous. You're firing me over a misunderstanding." The HR director didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "We're terminating your employment based on documented behavioral issues, a violation of company conduct, and workplace aggression." Yesterday's incident was the final straw. She slid a folder across the table. Inside were complaints, over a dozen of them. Many from junior employees who had once been too afraid to speak up. Brandon's arrogance had shielded him for months, maybe even years. His numbers were good. He was confident in meetings. He knew people. But behind the scenes, a storm had been building. Employees had endured his off-color jokes, backhanded compliments, and condescending tone for far too long. Until now, no one dared to challenge him. But when you publicly throw soda at a black woman in a professional environment, and that woman turns out to be the CEO's wife, suddenly, no one is afraid anymore. The Coke incident cracked the dam wide open. Emails poured into HR from all departments. "He told me I wasn't client material because of my accent. He once said I don't look like someone who works in marketing," and laughed. "He micromanages women, but lets his male team do whatever they want." One intern even wrote, "Thank you for finally holding him accountable." Brandon stared at the papers, still in disbelief. "People are exaggerating. This is a witch hunt." "No, Brandon," the HR director replied calmly. "This is accountability, and accountability had no room for entitlement." By lunchtime, Brandon was officially out. His name removed from the company's Slack. His desk cleared by office services. His framed awards were boxed up and handed to him at the front door. The man who once walked the hallways like a king now stood on the curb, holding a cardboard box with nothing but silence around him. Inside the office, things changed fast. Dr. Naomi Caldwell didn't return just to visit. She returned with a mission, not out of revenge, not to boast, but because she saw an opportunity to fix a culture that had gone unchecked for too long. She was appointed as the company's new leadership and culture advisor. Her role? To rebuild what Brandon and others like him had eroded: trust, safety, equality, and professionalism. Naomi didn't come in swinging. She came in listening. She held one-on-one meetings with junior employees and asked, "What makes you feel unheard?" She invited managers into workshops where they learned how to lead with empathy, not ego. She reviewed hiring practices, mentorship structures, and feedback systems. People who had once dreaded coming into the office started to feel seen. A young woman in accounting said, "It finally feels like I don't have to pretend to be someone else just to fit in." A quiet analyst shared in a team meeting, "This is the first time anyone's asked me how I want to grow here." Naomi didn't lecture people. She inspired them. Meanwhile, Brandon tried to fight back. He filed a wrongful termination claim, threatening to go public with a discrimination accusation of his own. But his own words, captured in that now infamous video, destroyed any defense he had. The clip quietly made the rounds in HR circles. Recruiters passed it among each other like a cautionary tale. Brandon's LinkedIn activity dropped off. His applications went unanswered. His name became quietly associated with the phrase, "Coke King Guy." His reputation stained worse than Naomi's blouse. And while his career faded into silence, Naomi's presence continued to rise, not just inside the company, but as a voice for workplace change. She wasn't just the CEO's wife anymore. She was a respected leader, a trusted advisor, and a quiet force for good, all without raising her voice. The fall of Brandon was fast, but the rise of something better had just begun. Inside the office, people started breathing differently. For months, maybe even years, the energy had been off, tense, political, even toxic. There was always a sense that the loudest person won. That charm beat kindness. That results excuse behavior. But now things were changing. People weren't just watching their words. They were examining their actions. Respect wasn't just a buzzword in a PowerPoint anymore. It became the standard. And it all started with one woman who refused to react with anger and instead responded with grace. Dr. Naomi Caldwell didn't walk around the office like a queen taking a throne. She moved quietly, asked questions, and listened, really listened, to people who'd never been asked how they felt before. She sat with interns and asked about their onboarding experience. She pulled aside department heads and asked, "Are your people thriving or surviving?" She challenged upper management to reflect on what they allowed, not just what they enforced. Her approach wasn't loud, but it was seismic. Workshops were launched, not just about diversity, but about communication, empathy, unconscious bias, and ethical leadership. She didn't scold, she educated. She didn't point fingers, she pointed forward. Employees began speaking up, not in fear, but in confidence. They started calling out subtle disrespect. They checked on each other more. Even casual conversations in the break room felt safer, lighter, more real. A junior employee, Michael, said during a team huddle, "It finally feels like this place wants us to succeed as people, not just as workers." That's what Naomi was building. Not just a better workplace, but a better community. Brandon's story didn't disappear, not quite. Though the company never made a public statement, out of legal caution, word spread through corporate circles. It's funny how the business world works. Someone always knows someone who knows someone. Recruiters whispered, "Isn't he the guy from that soda thing? I heard he got fired for throwing a Coke at the CEO's wife. Yeah, let's pass on him." Brandon tried rebranding himself. New profile picture, new bio, new startup ideas. But the digital stain wouldn't wash off. Screenshots of the video still lived on quiet corners of LinkedIn. Private group chats kept the story alive. He became a cautionary tale in MBA classes, a silent warning in HR training, a meme in a Slack channel titled, "Don't Be That Guy." But this story? It was never really about Brandon. It was about what his downfall revealed and what it taught everyone watching. Here's the truth. Respect isn't a luxury you offer to the powerful. It's a requirement you show to everyone. That receptionist you ignore? She might be the CEO's sister. That janitor you dismiss? He might be on a scholarship paid by the company's founder. That quiet woman you mock with a Coke can? She might be married to the man who signs your paychecks. But even if they aren't related to anyone powerful, they still matter. Because respect doesn't depend on status. It depends on character. What Brandon never understood is that people don't remember your job title. They remember how you made them feel. And in one careless, entitled moment, he reminded an entire company that toxic behavior hides behind polished shoes and confident smiles. But here's the twist. Brandon's downfall became everyone else's wake-up call. Months after the incident, the office had transformed. Promotions were no longer based only on performance, but also on leadership and emotional intelligence. Feedback sessions became two-way conversations. People who had felt invisible now felt seen. And at the center of it all, Naomi. She never once bragged. She never once said, "I told you so." She just kept doing the work, planting seeds of kindness, accountability, and self-awareness everywhere she went. And maybe that's why her impact stuck. The company didn't just replace Brandon. They redefined success. They stopped asking, who brings the most money in, and started asking, who brings the best energy in? They stopped tolerating office tyrants. They started rewarding those who build up others, not tear them down. Naomi's leadership taught them that culture isn't built in boardrooms. It's built in how we greet the intern, how we handle mistakes, how we speak to people who have nothing to offer us, but everything to teach us. So, what would you have done if you were in that office that day? Would you have spoken up? Would you have laughed along nervously? Would you have stayed silent? Or helped clean up the mess? Here's the truth. We've all been in rooms where someone like Brandon holds power. Maybe you've seen it. Maybe you've been him. Maybe you've been the one silently taking it. But this story is your reminder. Every room can change. Every culture can evolve. And every voice, even the quiet ones, has the power to shift the entire story. So the next time you feel tempted to judge someone by how they look, where they stand, or what title they don't have, remember Naomi. Remember Brandon. And remember, respect is not optional. It's the bare minimum.